And welcome back, everybody. It's Tuesday Talks with John Robinson, talking about real estate, talking about life, talking about whatever it is that's on your mind. Glad to be with you again today in sunny, beautiful, beautiful Boise, Idaho. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Idaho area as far as southern Idaho. Man, it is just a gorgeous place to be. Things are clean, things are manicured. I tell people all the time, it feels like living in America again. So back in Boise, just arrived back from Portland yesterday. So glad to be back here in my now new hometown. Also, it was an amazing time being back in the Portland market with everybody because of the fact that I got to see so many of you guys. We had the flipping field trip. What a great event. Shared that, of course, with Robert Hardin and the PDX REI group meetup, as opposed to our normal Thursday meetup. We actually did it on Saturday. So this last Saturday, May 24th, we did that with Robert Hardin. So curious if anybody watching today, if you guys were there for that. I'd love to hear your feedback. I really mean it. I'd love to hear it. Just maybe post in the comments. Tell people if you were there for the flipping field trip. That was on Saturday rather, and we had a great time going out to 3 different flips. So we got to actually see 3 different flip projects live in action. Got to see everything that was going on, and really got our minds wrapped around what does it take to get into one of these deals. What does it take to get these things done? Okay, after the thrill of the hunt is over, now you've taken down the buffalo, so to speak. Now you got to get in there and carve it up, and and skin it out using these metaphorical terms. You can kind of get the idea. It's a lot of work to take down a buffalo, but then also to get something out of it that's productive and profitable. So we had a great time. I did, at least. I hope you guys did too. I'd love to hear back. If anybody's on watching right now, please let us know if you were there for the flipping field trip. A couple of other things I want to talk about today, and I'll just wait for a few of you guys to jump on to give me your feedback. I want to talk about the some of the different things that are going on in the world of wholesaling, and wanted to point out a few things that I think might be helpful for some of you that are actually out there wholesaling right now. But mainly, I'm here for you. So you guys tell me what you want to talk about, and I'm going to give you my feedback. Of course, my name is John Robinson. Been flipping houses for 10 years. Been wholesaled hundreds of deals nationwide. Actually, I can do deals anywhere in the country. So if you guys are out there and you're just watching this and maybe you're not sure what to do, where to look, or maybe you got a deal that you're looking at, you want to know what to do with it, please let me know. So I'm over here in this really cool space that I get to use. This actually connect a family property, so I'm here in my space. But I've been noticing my background and my everything about this space. I think I'm going to be changing some things up here. So if you guys are watching right now, you're like, what in the world is he doing? I'm in a big kind of a conference room space. It was built out for doing business meetings and appointments. A little bit dated, so hopefully don't mind the background. I know that most of you are like, we didn't even notice it until you said it, but I take that into consideration because I want to try to create an environment that's super conducive for conversation, for value, and just for the fact that we get to take this opportunity, right? We get to do this. We get to go live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And so, guys, I'm really glad to be here with you today. Josh Hayes says I completely forgot today was Tuesday. So we all know that Josh Hayes must have been grinding yesterday, or maybe he took the day off and thought today was Monday. In any case, Josh, welcome. Glad to have you here. And I know Josh was there. Actually, Josh came out with his mom and with his little girl, Lucy. And so they were there at the flipping field trip. I think they were there for property visit number 2 and 3. So we had, again, 3 separate flip sites that we went to. We checked things out. We got to talk to the flippers. We got to meet some contractors that were there. Got to lay eyes on the actual work. It's one thing to see pictures, right, on a slide screen or in a post. It's another thing to be in a classroom setting where we're kind of going over things and networking. It's a totally different animal when you get to get out on site. And it's like, hey, watch out for nails. Don't step there. There's a hole in the floor. Why did you do this instead of that? Or this is what used to be here, and then we change it to do that. So I had a lot of fun. So I love being on a construction site. That's where I grew up, and I love being out there with you guys, kind of getting to see some of you take it all in, the sight, the smell, the sounds, and really be able to get that idea of what a flip looks like in real time, in real life. And so I thought it was a blast. Josh, I don't know if you had a good time. I know you were trying to chase Lucy around and keep her from falling down in a hole, which, again, we probably next time we do this, we'll have to have some people sign disclosures and disclaimers, but it was a good time. So I see there's only a couple of people on to join us so far, so I'm not going to get too into it, but I did want to give you guys a chance. If you're watching right now, whether it's on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, I wanted to give you a chance to ask your questions. So if you have any questions at all, please post those questions in the comments. I'd like to go back through at some point and just be looking at what people are saying, what people are asking. So feel free to jump in there, guys, and ask about that. I'm also looking at my Instagram, see if there's anybody on here that's asking questions. So I'm not seeing anything so far. So guys, feel free to jump in there and ask questions. I want to talk about some wholesaling stuff. Okay. So while we're waiting for people to post their question, wholesaling, obviously, most of you know this. Wholesaling is where you, the buyer or the wholesaler, if you're doing wholesaling, your buyer would go out and you'd get a contract from a seller. So the seller agrees, okay, we're going to say the seller agrees to sell their property, and this is what the contract looks like, to fill in the blank. We're going to say wholesaler for X amount of dollars. Okay, so let's just say you're a wholesaler and you go out and you get someone to sign your contract that says the seller agrees to sell their property to you as a wholesaler for fill in the blank. Let's just call it easy. I'm going to be using some back east numbers or some Midwest numbers. So we're going to make it super easy, and we're going to say that the seller agrees to sell this property to you for $100,000. Okay, so you now have a signed contract, right? So you have a signed contract as a wholesaler. Now, here's the question. Do you, as a wholesaler, do you know that, do you have $100,000 in your bank account? Most often, most wholesalers don't, okay? So now the seller is saying, okay, you, Mr. Wholesaler, you, Mrs. Wholesaler, you're going to buy my property, right? For me for $100,000, right? Okay, now you, as the wholesaler, you take that contract and you go out to the world and you tell the world, you say, I have a contract, okay, and this is what you're doing, that I will sell to you for, or I will assign, we could maybe use that word, for $110,000, okay? So you go out and you do your marketing, wholesaler, and you say, hey, I have this agreement. The seller is going to sell me this property for $100,000. And so you go out and tell the world, I will sell this contract, or the proper terminology is assign the contract. I will let you come in and take my place on my contract for $110,000. Now remember, have it on contract for 100, and then you say, I'm going to let somebody else take this contract over for, or have their name in my place on this contract for $110,000. So the potential profit there is $10,000, right? Okay. Now, the buyer, the end buyer, we'll call him, the end buyer is going to come in and they are going to say, buyer agrees to pay $110,000 for this property. And that buyer signs the name, they put their name on there, and the buyer says, okay, I'll pay you $110,000 for that property. Now the buyer may or may not know that you have the property under agreement for $110,000. It's somewhat irrelevant. It does matter. I'm not saying it doesn't matter at all, but it's somewhat irrelevant to our illustration here. Meaning this, that as long as the buyer is okay with paying $110,000, as long as they're okay with that price for that property, then it shouldn't be a problem, right? Okay. Now here's where you guys run into issues, okay? And by the way, I've been wholesaling now for many, many years. I flipped my first house in 2000 and what year was it? 2015. I flipped my first house. You guys have probably heard that story before, my accidental flip. And from there, I got into this whole world of learning real estate. And of course, very quickly, I learned about wholesaling. So I've wholesaled literally, I would guess at least 100, if not more than 100 different deals, okay, over the last 10 years. Now, that's not actually a lot. I know it sounds like a lot, but it's really not, because I've never been a full-time wholesaler. Okay, but those of you that are out there learning this, here's the problem, okay, a couple problems. When you go out to the world and you tell the world, I have a contract that I'll sell to you for 110,000, and again, normally your contract would say on ABC property. Well, you have to be careful, because the seller might find out that you're trying to sell that contract, because if you're out there telling the world about this, then there's a pretty good chance that this person who's also in the world might find out. It happens all the time, okay? Now, is that really a big problem? No, not if you actually lay the groundwork and do your job correctly as a wholesaler, okay? If you are, full disclosure, you say to your seller, I'm going to pay you $100,000. Do you mind if I make a fee on top of that? It won't take anything away from what you're making, but I'm going to make a fee whenever my buyer, I'm going to bring in a buyer, and they're going to come in. They're actually going to purchase this property from me. And if I work out a deal with them, or they're going to pay me a little bit of money, does that work for you still? If I'm going to make sure I get you $100,000. That's the way that a true wholesaling business should operate, okay? Now, the problem is a lot of wholesalers don't disclose that. They come in and they act like, using typically a proof of funds. So they get a POF, right? Proof of funds. And that proof of funds basically says, yep, that buyer, that wholesaler's name has $110,000 that they can pay for a house. Okay, so a lot of times what wholesalers do is they go out there like, I got $110,000 or $100,000. I can go out and make offers on properties. That's fine. But the problem is when you don't disclose to the seller, and the seller has no idea that you're just going to be assigning their contract, right, to the world. You're going to sign it, and whoever brings in the $110,000, you're going to buy a fee. If you don't disclose that, then this pops up on their radar somewhere. Oh, this wholesaler, let's just say I'm the wholesaler. Someone says, John and Jane Smith, or Bob and Jane Smith. Well, Bob and Mary. Let's call them Bob and Mary. Say Bob and Mary Smith said, we thought we were selling our property to John for $100,000, but we just saw something, or someone brought it to our attention that he's out here telling the world that he'll buy it for $110,000. That just doesn't seem right to us. We didn't know that we thought we were working with John. So now we're not very happy. Okay. Now here's the problem. Your buyer, the end buyer, the one that actually does have $110,000, and if you're doing your job well as a wholesaler, you better make sure you verify that, because a lot of people, they hear someone will, hey, I got it under contract for $110,000, and I only have to pay $100,000 for it, right? So I have to pay $100,000, and I got, my buyer is going to come in. They told me they guarantee me they're going to pay $110,000. Okay, well, did you check and make sure that end buyer has the money to pay that? Okay, and did you make sure that they're not just showing you another proof of funds statement that's actually not their money, just like you used to show your seller that you have that money? You see what I'm saying? What's good for the goose is good for the gander, is what they used to say. So you have to make sure that you're being honest and ethical and disclosing what it is that you're doing. That's the only way that I recommend doing wholesaling, is you have to do it honestly. It doesn't mean you have to tell them exactly what you're going to be making. It just means that you should be allowing the seller, the person that thinks they're working with you, you should be have the decency to let them know that you're not the one that's bringing the money. You work with people, you work with other investors that are going to close and make sure that they get the $100,000 that you promised they would. And in exchange for you bringing the deal to these people, those people are going to pay you a fee. And, you can say it could be a couple thousand, it could be as much as 10,000. I don't know what they're going to be willing to pay. I just know that I have access to a whole bunch of buyers out there. And so I'm going to go out and based on that information, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to tell the world that I have this property under contract. Okay. If you don't disclose, then here's what can happen. Okay. Does that make sense so far? Give me a 1 in the comments if that makes sense. I want to see if you guys are tracking this. Give me a 1. I'm not seeing much chatter here, so I want to make sure I'm not just talking over everybody. So the idea is that the seller, we'll call this document A, and then this is not actual documents, but we're just going to use this for illustration, okay? And based on our illustration, give me a 1 in the comments if you guys know what I'm talking about, if you're seeing what I'm saying. We're going to call this A1. Okay, so here's our situation. We get a seller to agree to sell their property to me for $100,000, and I use to verify, right? To verify that I have $100,000 to pay them, I have a proof of fund letter that says, yep, John has $100,000. Okay, so now armed with my signed contract and my proof of funds that I was able to use to get the contract, I now go out and we'll call this marketing. Okay. Step B is I go out and I market to the world that I have a contract that I'll sell to you for $110,000. It's not my house. I'm not a realtor, but I will sell this property for $110,000. Does that make sense so far? Okay. And then you have a buyer. Ultimately, the goal is to get a buyer to come along and say, you know what, John, I'll pay you $110,000 for that property. I like that property. I don't really care what you have it under contract for. I just like it, and I like it enough to pay $110,000. Okay, that's the simplistic, easy version of wholesaling. Here's where you run into problems. Okay, you go out and you start marketing your property as a wholesaler. I got it under contract. I can't believe it. It worked. They signed an agreement with me. And so you're super excited, right? You're like, I did exactly what they said. I took the course. I got my guru. My guru said he'll give me a proof of funds. So I now have my proof of funds letter, which is not anymore. It's literally not worth more than this piece of paper that it's written on, right? But it's a proof of funds. And again, guys, I understand how this works. I'm not even saying I've never used this. I'm not even saying it's altogether bad. What I'm saying is this proof of funds letter is literally insignificant in the big scheme of things. It doesn't prove that you have these funds. Be honest, does it? You have no funds to actually prove that you can close this deal as you promised. Okay, but you're excited because you have the seller to agree to pay you the $100,000 that they'll sell it to you for $100,000. And so you're all excited. You go out there and you tell the world, I've got this contract and I'm going to sell this contract. I'll assign it to you for $110,000. So potentially you stand to make what? $10,000 on the deal, right? Here's where you run into problems. There are people out there, buyers, who will say to you, yeah, I'll agree to pay you $110,000. And then once you give them the details of your property and your seller and everything, and you arrange, but they usually say, but I'm not going to do this until I go and see the property, right? So what they can do is they can get that address and then they can go do the same exact thing that you did to find the deal in the first place. What does that normally look like? Either buying it off a list, or it's a pre-foreclosure, or it's a long listed property. It's been on the market forever, or whatever. It doesn't even matter what it is. However you found it, doesn't matter, because once you disclose the address, which you have to do, nobody's going to buy a property for $110,000 if they don't even know the address of the property. Would you agree? So once they see that address, there's a lot of buyers who will go out there and they will cut you out of the deal. Okay, they'll take you and say, what do we need you for? I can just go and I can talk directly to who? I can talk directly to the seller. All right. So that is what happens all the time. And so they go to the seller. What's the conversation look like? Usually it looks something like this. Hey, Mr. Seller, John told me you had your property for sale. That's great. He asked me to come over and take a look at it. Just by the way, what's he offering to you for? Oh, 100,000? Huh. Well, he's trying to get me to buy it for 110,000. You know what? I can pay you 105,000. I save 5,000 from what John's trying to sell it to me for. You make $5,000 more. We both win. What do you say we just cut John out of the deal and we agreed 100 to 105? Guys, that happens in wholesaling all the time. So that's why it's so important to be doing full disclosure. If you're not disclosing what you're doing, if you're not disclosing how you're working, and if you're not building a good relationship with the seller, which is why I like to go direct to seller. I do not personally like agent outreach. The reason I don't like agent outreach is because I don't get to talk directly to the seller. I don't get to establish rapport with them. I don't get to build a relationship. I don't get to really hear the pain point. There's a realtor that's buffering everything. And when you have a realtor involved, it's just one more person that's a decision maker. Does that make sense? You guys give me some feedback in the comments if that makes sense. Does that, at least, even if you don't agree with me, to say, okay, I get what you're trying to say. Okay, give me some feedback. All right, give me a little bit of feedback here. Okay, so if that makes sense to you guys, yep. Josh Hayes says yes. Thank you, Josh. Okay, we're seeing a little bit of feedback here. Got some people that are tracking. Okay, if that makes sense to you and you see how this can potentially be a problem, which, by the way, it's a problem for wholesalers all the time. Why am I even talking about this? Well, because I know so many of you out there are working so hard to get deals under contracts, and you're a lot of times you're rushing in and you're just putting out numbers. And what happens a lot of times is you can actually end up making yourself look really bad because you either maybe you get the contract, maybe the house isn't worth 100,000, right? Maybe the end buyer, the flipper, the investor, the buy and hold person, maybe they're like, I don't really want this property. It's not worth 110,000. The most I could pay for it would be 80,000. Well, now you have to go back and you either have to ask for a major reduction, right? Or you have to just, a lot of times what wholesalers do, because, and this is not at all disrespectful, but it's a lot of times what wholesalers do is they're operating in a place where they really have no financial commitment. They have no skin in the game. And so it's nothing for them to just walk away and just never call this seller back. They not only not pay them the 100,000, they also don't explain why they didn't pay, and they don't answer the phone whenever they call and it doesn't close. So that's another thing. Wholesalers do this all the time. So I am a big, big advocate. Okay. You say, what are you saying? I'm a big advocate of no matter what you do, no matter what you're doing, no matter how you do it, make sure you disclose. Tell everything. Have your contract spell out everything. Let them know the whole deal. You say, man, what if they know I'm going to go out and make money on it? Perfect. If you did your job and you got them to agree to a price point that makes sense for them, and they don't care what you go out and make on top of this, because they just know that, hey, if you're going to give me $100,000, I'm good. If you do that, put the hard work on the front end instead of trying to put all the hard work in on the back end and scramble to keep this deal alive when it may not have even been a deal to begin with. Is that making sense? I hope that it does. I hope that I'm not missing something or oversimplifying it. There's so much more that goes into this, but hopefully that kind of makes sense for you guys. So I think that if you have at least the honesty to disclose everything to the seller up front, then you are definitely going to appreciate the fact that you heard this from me today, and you're going to be like, oh man, that was so good. Because when you run into trouble, right, when it doesn't close on time, or when you have someone who tries to go around you, or when you have nobody interested in your deal, maybe you go out to the world and you're like, hey world, I've got my contract and I'll sell it to you for 110,000, right? You go out and you do your marketing, step B, right, to the world to get to dispo it. You go out in the world and tell the world that, and then they're like, we don't care. That property is not worth 110,000. It's not even worth 100,000. And then you start saying, oh crap, I've got to go figure this out, right? It's so much better if you have already built a good rapport and a good relationship with the seller. And I like seller direct. Again, not saying you can't go direct to agent. There's two different things. There's DTS, direct to seller, DTA. DT, what is it? Yeah, DTA, direct to agent. I don't personally like the direct to agent because I like to work with the seller directly. I want to know what their pain points are. I want to know what's going on in their life. I want to know why they want to sell this property, right? I want to know that because it informs how I make my offer. I can make a totally different offer that might make really, really good sense for the seller if I know what the seller's situation is, as opposed to just seeing a property that's listed on the MLS. Someone's got it for sale. I called the agent, try to negotiate something that they might agree to take to their seller, and then I never know what happened. There's a lot of things that goes into wholesaling, guys, and I would just encourage you that in this, you would do well to put as much work as you put into wholesaling. You would do really well if you put in that same amount of work into something else, like working with someone's team to be like their point man for flips that they're trying to buy. Right? There's end buyers all over the place that they're just looking for someone to be out there generating these leads. But you would do well to do that for someone else's team where you can at least get a guaranteed income, and maybe you can get a percentage of the flip on the back end. Something where you actually have a legitimate business that's going out there and grinding and doing deals, and they're in the same community and they're actually doing the projects and they're seeing it from beginning to end. That would actually be better than to, and I say better, at least when you're starting out, right? That would be better than to go and do all this work and jump through all these hoops if you're not planning on being a full-scale volume wholesaler. What do I mean by that? I mean, think about the amount of conversations you have to have in order to get this one contract. So many conversations, so many phone calls, and it doesn't mean that it's not worth it. I'm just saying, when you think about it, this is really not scalable unless you have a team and you're doing volume. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. Josiah Grimes, put a 1 in the chat if you know who Josiah Grimes is. I'm just curious. Put a 1 in the chat if you know Josiah Grimes. Or put a 1 in the chat if you know who Josiah Grimes is, or if you know who Jamil DMG is. Okay. And maybe you don't know who Josiah Grimes is, but you probably have heard of Jamil DMG. Josiah Grimes is Jamil's business partner. Okay. So if you guys have ever heard of Keyglee, Keygle, Keyglee, that's a franchise, a wholesaling franchise. They have taken their business and they just exploded it. Okay. Massive industrial type industry affecting business. Okay. Josiah Grimes, who started that business, who is really the brainchild behind building the business side of it. Josiah Grimes said he limited out at his peak when he was just churning and burning and a single guy, no obligations, just working through it. He limited out at doing 6 deals a month consistently. Okay. I think he said he got to 5. He could sometimes do 6, but he was closing about 5 deals a month on his own. Now, if you think about it, from the point of view of, let's just say an average deal is $10,000. What are your expenses? Even if you're making $50,000 a month, you're not going to have that many expenses if you're just by yourself, right? So that can still be really good money. 5 deals a month is really good money. But if you're going to actually scale it and have money that comes in when you're not working, if you're not calling direct to sellers, if you're not calling direct to agents, then you really need to be looking at, okay, maybe I should put the same amount of effort into a business model that's already working, and I could work the phones with someone and get, a flat fee or get a commission, and it's something that's scalable and they're actually flipping and doing all this stuff. I'm just telling you guys this because there's so many people I see work so hard and they get deals locked up, even if it's not exactly the truth that they have proof of funds. They get it locked up and they take it out to the world and they market it. And then a buyer comes along and says, yeah, I'll pay that money for that deal. I'll pay $110,000. I'll give you 10 grand. And then the buyer ends up going directly to the seller and working something out to where, hey, the seller stands to make more money if they work with the end buyer, right? They're going to be making part of that money that you would be making. That happens all the time. It's just happened to a couple of wholesalers that I know just this last week, which is why I'm talking about this. Okay. The other thing is you get out there getting contracts signed, and then if you can't perform on those contracts, it doesn't take very long. Guys, the world of real estate, with people that actually do deals, the world of real estate is pretty small. It doesn't take long for people to figure out, yeah, John just gets people to say that he gets people to sign. He says he's going to pay 110,000 or 100,000, but he never actually closes. It doesn't take long for people to start saying, we're not going to take your offer. Sorry. And they won't tell you that directly, but they'll say, no, we have another offer. Well, we're going with somebody else. So I'm trying to help some of you that are out there doing this grind with wholesaling, saying, make sure you disclose everything, right? Full disclosure to your seller. Make sure that they know what you're doing. If they know what you're doing and they still are fine with working with you, then you've done a very, very good job. And that's what you should be doing. You should do a good job. Make sure that you're very careful on the end. Make sure that your buyer who agrees to pay the $110,000, get to know them a little bit, vet them, find out who they are, what they're all about. And then if they come back and you find out, man, this actually is a legitimate buyer, and they come back and they're like, hey, we would have paid 110,000 for this, but now that we've done our due diligence, this thing's really not worth 110,000. It's not even worth 100,000. The most we could pay you is 85,000 for it. Be very careful that you don't get stuck on the fact that it's worth an X amount. If this person is actually legit and they're actually closing deals in your area, that should tell you something. If this is what they're paying for the property or this is what they're offering, then it might be for a reason. Okay. It might be that property isn't worth as much as maybe you initially thought it was, and that the seller certainly was willing to take, right? So hopefully that makes sense, guys. I'm not trying to clown up on wholesaling. I'm all about wholesaling. I think that wholesalers are awesome. I think they do a ton of work. I'm just trying to make sure that you guys actually get some reward for your effort, because boy, wholesaling can be a ton of work. Can I get a witness, right? What questions do you guys have right now? Let's just take a second and pause and say, let's let some people ask some questions. I see Josh Hayes is on here. Josh, what questions do you have? I'm going to look back through here. He says, I learned the hard way on everything. I needed to include in my contract, but all the kinks have been worked out. So maybe Josh, you can elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that. You said, I'm learning the hard way that you apparently you weren't including everything in your contract, but now you're working through that. Maybe post in the chat, in the comments, what exactly it is that you meant by that. So Josh Hayes is out there wholesaling. He's making calls. He's got deals coming in around the country. Josh, I don't know where you're finding your leads, but you're obviously doing something, because you're sending me stuff to look at, and I know you're putting it out there to other groups. I know that Ankit is on here normally. I'm not sure if he's able to make it today because I think he is out of town, but Ankit was also doing some lead generation and he had some deals that he floated across my way. And one of the things that I found out is that when I started making some calls to verify a particular property that I was looking at that Ankit had brought to me, I said, yeah, I might be interested in this. And I started doing some of my due diligence. One of the people that I contacted was like, oh yeah, you guys are like daisy chaining that deal, right? I said, sorry, it was a realtor. They said, yeah, we saw that deal posted on another platform that, you guys are trying to like basically just get this under contract and just try to sell it and make, quick money, right? And so I kind of had to explain what wholesaling is and talk them through that. But what I found out was that that marketing process, I didn't, it's not like I didn't know this, but what Ankit found out was that whatever term you use to market your deal, right? Whether that's Facebook Marketplace, whether that's Investor Lift, whether that is, let's see, again, Facebook, it could be a Facebook group. You could, whatever it is, when you go put this out there to the world, that means everybody in the world has access to it, including the seller or the seller's agent, and including your end buyer who you're trying to contact, right? So just keep that in mind, because you might be putting it out there and you might not know it, that you might be telling the world that, hey, I got this deal under contract, and there's some people that could be looking at it going, well, that doesn't seem right. I thought he was buying that property directly from me. That stuff happens. So, all right, Josh here says in his contract, says, I did not include that EMD, by the way, that's earnest money deposit, was to be paid post-inspection. So I had to get that changed, and that I'm not going to pay the realtor commissions. They tried sneaking that in. Yeah. So, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, Josh. So when you say they tried sneaking that in, here's the thing. It is very typical for a cash buyer to be the one who pays the commission, the realtor commissions. Okay. Now you say, I thought the seller paid the realtor commissions. In a normal transaction, yes. But with dealing with cash in the cash buyer world, oftentimes cash buyers will say, I'll pay all the closing costs. Or the seller will say, I'll agree to your cash price, which is usually what? Lower than retail, but only if you pay for all the fees and the commissions and stuff involved. So that's what kind of causes some of these things. So in other words, you can push back on that, but so can they. Does that make sense? And by the way, one of the ways that most sellers and sellers agents like to confirm that you really are a serious buyer and you're not just using, a piece of paper to say that you're going to get it. One of the ways that they do that, confirm that oftentimes, is they will say, well, we want an earnest money deposit. We want you to put money down in earnest right now that you're actually going to close this deal. So I have a couple deals right now. I got $3,000 sitting in a bank account somewhere at this title company because I wanted to show that I was a legitimate buyer, right? Hold on a minute. I'm looking. I got a call here from a seller actually just coming in. I'm going to text them real quick. I got a seller that I'm working with. Okay. And so you want to make sure that you actually have your paperwork in place. You want to make sure that you have all that inspection stuff in place, because if you say, okay, I'm going to pay you my earnest money right now, well, like Josh discovered here, they might say, okay, we're going to give you a time to inspect this property, but we still want some money up front. Sometimes you can't get around that, Josh. If a buyer or a seller knows what they're doing at all, they might actually say, hey, I want that money up front right now, because if you can't give me money up front right now, then you might not actually be a legitimate buyer to begin with. Okay, that happens sometimes. So Josh says here, I wanted to pay them commission, honestly, just to incentive them, bring them, but the buyer doesn't like to pay it. But that buyer doesn't like to pay it. Yep. So you're playing the middleman on the back end. And I would say most of the time also, Josh, I wouldn't want to pay the buyer's commission either. So it's easy for you to say, I want to have the buyer pay the commission, right? But that's because you're not actually the end buyer. You're just marketing the deal that you have under contract to the end buyer. So of course, the seller, they're going to want someone else to foot the bill for the commission if they're selling at a discount. And of course, the buyer doesn't want to pay $110,000 plus the seller's agent's commission, because he's like, man, I'm already paying Josh, more than he has under contract for. So those are just things you have to kind of work out. You have to kind of get a feel for how you like to do it. So Josh says, luckily I disclosed I was finding deals for a fund. I said it to them who did not want to pay it. Yeah, so that's good. You just disclose. That's right. Andy here is chiming in. He says, I have 4 buyers for sub 2 in Portland, Vancouver areas. Ideally with large land, if anyone has something. I have seller finance and sub 2 properties, but doesn't match their buy box. So that might be something to post in here, Andy, is what does that buy box look like for your buyers? Somebody says, okay, I got a sub 2 deal. Man, I'm going to go talk to Andy, but it's like a sub 2 deal. It's like a condominium that has no yard at all. Obviously, that may not work for your buyer. Or it might be that you have this big tract of land, but people are like, I don't want that. I want something that's maintenance free. I don't have to do anything to take care of it. So those buy boxes are pretty important. Guys, I hope that this has been helpful for you. I felt like I needed to give a little bit of clarification on this wholesaling process and what needs to be done. One of the things that you need to do is disclose. The other thing you need to do, like Josh was pointing out, is find out who's paying what, right? And when does that payment get made? So, okay, I'll be willing to pay that $3,000, but I'm not going to pay that $3,000 until after my inspection period. I want to be able to go in and inspect it, and I want to see that I like it. And then at the end of the inspection period, that doesn't mean we're going to actually close the deal yet, because I still have to go get all my money together. But I'll give you a little bit of that money right now after the inspection period. That's how I like to do it. And hopefully that makes sense. Something else I was going to talk about today. I made a post last week, and that post, in fact, I'll go ahead and read it here. See if I have that post handy. It was a post that said something. I don't want to misquote it, so that's why I want to pull it up here. Let's see. So I made a post that said something to the effect of, oh boy, I didn't realize there was spam. There's a lot of people that are posting a lot of stuff in the chat, and I really appreciate you guys doing that. By the way, if you were there for the flipping field trip, maybe let everybody else in the comments know what your thoughts were, if you enjoyed it. Let people know what that looked like for you, how it helped, if there was any major takeaways. I'm curious to hear that. I made a post about if you had $20,000 or more and you wanted to make a return on that money, you want to put that money to work so it makes more money, but you also wanted that money to be secured by real estate. I put a post out there. Well, I had some of you reach out to me, and I got some questions asked. So I'll just kind of give you a little sneak peek. I'll tell you what exactly I had in mind for this. There is such a thing, and I've talked about this before. And by the way, this is educational. I'm not soliciting for you to invest with me. I'm not soliciting to get your money. I want to be really, really clear about that. So this is an educational. This next segment is strictly educational. But there is an investment vehicle that is called a single asset fund. Okay, and that single asset fund is it's kind of interesting, but more or less, it allows you to take a particular property, and say I was the buyer here on this property, and I was like, you know what, I like that property for $110,000, but I only have $40,000, and I want to go out and raise the capital to take down this one particular property at $110,000. So there's a lot of different ways to do that, but a single asset fund is a way that's very, very secure for the investors. And it's also very specific to this particular deal. So you don't have to worry about getting into a long-term commitment. And so I have a single asset fund that I'm putting together. And I just thought, you know what, if it's something that people are interested in learning more about, like what does this actually look like? I would be interested in taking a couple of people through this, maybe on a Zoom call, just showing them what it is that I'm building so that they know. And if that's somewhere down the road, they want to set up one of these funds themselves, or maybe they want to participate in a fund like this, then they would have the information. That's really what all it is. It's an informative type of webinar slash Zoom. And I want to make it accessible to anybody, but I don't want to just say, hey, I'm going to tell this to the entire world. I only want to do this with people who actually have the funds to invest, because I want them to be educated on what they could do with that money. Okay, so guys, if you're interested in that, please DM me directly. I'm going to do a follow-up with everybody that reached out to me via the post. But I think it's a really, really good way of putting your money into something that's very, very secure and something that makes sense financially without you having to have anything to do with the project other than just the initial investment. And it's something that's very safe. It's SEC approved. There's a lot of cool stuff. I'll be going over all that in the upcoming webinar or upcoming Zoom, whatever you want to call it. I'll be happy to talk to you guys about that. All right, Josh Hayes, let's see. Andy says the flipping field trip was awesome. Awesome, should do more of these. Andy, we are going to do more of those. Looking forward to doing that again. Thank you, by the way, Andy. Thank you to your son. Although I saw you doing more recording than your son did. But thank you for helping out. Andy recorded that and did a great job with the video. Josh Hayes says, definitely like that interactive style where it was in the trenches. Wasn't it cool? I mean, we were out there, literally the one had sheetrock was everywhere. There was, piles of scrap and debris and all kinds. It was as raw as you can get, right? Two of those were. The other one was completely finished. Chris's property, that was great. We'll talk about that. So let's see. Monica says, sadly I missed it. Hoping to be at the next one. Monica, I hope you can make it too. Okay, guys, we're getting ready to wrap things up today. Try to keep these under 50 minutes so you guys can have lunch or listen in and then get back to back to everything in life. It is Tuesday, and we do this every single Tuesday. So, guys, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully, what we talked about today was informative, helpful. If it wasn't, then just tune back in next week. We'll cover something that you probably like. But please spread the word. Please make sure you are liked and subscribed. Make sure you've commented. Do something to help us get the word out about these Tuesday talks. We love having you guys here. And I will be seeing you guys very, very soon on another call soon. I know that there's a couple of you that I already have scheduled to talk to. So looking forward to chatting with you. You guys have a blessed day, and we'll talk to you soon. All right. Take care.